Hello, Star Wars Rebels fans. We're back for another episode of Rebels Recap. This week, we're talking about In the Name of the Rebellions, Part 1 and Part 2, Episodes 3 and 4 of Season 4. Original air date, October 23rd, 2017, with writers Gary Whitta and Matt Minkovitz. And I probably butchered that, Matt, and I apologize. So, guys, we're just excited to be back for Rebels Recap. This is our second episode of Rebels Recap in Season 4. You're going to hear a little bit different cast of characters this time, but we told you last time out that that's what we're going to expect. So this is Brian in the host chair. And a little bit of a role reversal, Robin. You got Robin Vogt on my left, and very far to my right across the pond, we've got Mr. Scott Inch. So how's it going, gentlemen?
Not bad, not bad. It's been a very cold day.
Yes, I have to say we're also experiencing here in the United States a little bit of some scary, I guess you could say frightful, with Halloween coming around the corner weather. So we're really excited, very excited to talk Rebels with everyone.
Yeah. All right, so guys, let's just set the stage here. So the kind of the official description of each of these episodes, as we just mentioned, with the excellent cast of characters of writers that we've got there. Episode Part 1. As members of the Rebel Alliance, Ezra and the Ghost crew must accept a mission to spy on an Imperial outpost they would rather destroy. And in Part 2, after being separated from Hera and Kanan, Ezra and Sabine join the desperate quest of Saw Gerrera to hunt down the Empire's elusive secret super weapon. So, guys, just overall thoughts. Like, I'll lead it off first, and Robin, I'm going to throw it to you. But I think I said it on Twitter a couple days ago, that these were like two of my like favorite non-landmark episodes that they've had. And, you know, we're talking like Twilight of the Apprentice, Twin Sons, 0 Hour, all those big ones. Like this is right there. Just all of the connective tissue we got there. What do you think about that, Robin?
There's just so much that this episode does in terms of, like you said, Brian, connective tissue. It brings these characters that we've grown to love in Star Wars Rebels, and it continues the canon in a direction where, as Star Wars fans, we know what ends up happening, but we don't know what happens in between. And these characters are propelling it forward, which is everything that a Star Wars fan wants.
Scott, what did you think of these episodes?
They were really great. I really enjoyed these two episodes as much as I enjoyed the season openers. These two episodes I really enjoyed a lot more. It just connected a lot more to the canon. It just connected more to what we kind of know about Rogue One and Catalyst. So you can see tiny bits, Jeddah, and a few other bits and pieces, kind of name drops as well. So it was great to see it kind of coming together for canon since we're getting so close to Rogue One.
It's exciting. I mean, guys, we've got about 1 year to Rogue One, maybe even less than that. We know Star Wars has kind of a weird timeline-ish thing where they base it on major events, and who cares? I just think that we've got such good stuff coming to us in Season 4. And Scott, you mentioned it. I think with the character of Saw Gerrera, they have really, really done a good job with him, starting with Rogue One. And they catapulted him from the Clone Wars. And then you mentioned, Scott, you got Catalyst, and he was a big player in Rebel Rising. And now we've seen him a couple different times. He was mentioned, I think, back in Season 2 with Zeb and Kallus when they were stuck on that moon. He got name dropped there. He was in Season 3 at the midpoint. Now we've got him here, guys, and it's just... They've done really, really well, I think, with that.
Yeah, there's a lot with Saw Gerrera, and I think we're going to really get into it once we start talking about other stuff. But Saw Gerrera is really starting to develop in Star Wars Rebels, and I think it's something that Star Wars fans, I know myself, I love what we saw with Saw Gerrera in Catalyst and what we saw in Rogue One, and to continue to build upon his story is just so great to see, even now in the animated form.
And I love the fact, Robin, that we've still got Forrest Whitaker lending his voice. We had Genevieve O'Reilly bringing back Mon Mothma here, and we'll talk. Actually, let's just dig right into it, guys. We say it oftentimes on Rebels Recap. We're just huge Star Wars Rebels fans, we're not here to tell you exactly what happened. Watch the episodes for yourself. This is where we talk about like really what our favorite moments are and what could that mean going forward. So, Robin, I'm going to kick it over to you first for your favorite moment in the Name of the Rebellion. Give me something from part 1 or part 2.
All right, let's talk about Mr. Brom Titus for a second, because I don't know. I think that Ezra's becoming the master, I guess you could say, of playing head games. However, the head games don't always play the right way. And I think where this could be the essence of a kid's show, which we always talk about, Brian and Scott, is that this is a kid's show. You know, there may be dark moments in it, but what Ezra does there, this is Brom Titus, and then Brom's on the other end, and that's all he says is, "You're speaking to Brom Titus." And it's just such a great little humorous twist to lead this thing off. And at the moment, it was wonderful. That's my favorite moment from both parts.
Yes, I actually, that was legitimately one of the funniest things that Rebels has done in 4 seasons up to this point. So very good choice. And that led to some other consequences. Spoiler alert. And actually, I probably should have led this off like we did last time, is this will be very spoiler filled. Again, we're hoping that you've watched both of these episodes before we're talking. It's been about a week since it aired. I mean, literally tomorrow on Halloween Eve, we're going to get the next 2 episodes. So we're just, by the time that scheduling allowed us to all connect to talk about these, we really hope that you've had that opportunity. But yeah, unfortunately, I think we may have seen the last of Mr. Brom Titus, Robin.
So sad.
It is so sad. So something that isn't sad is I want to go over to Scott. And Scott, what was your favorite moment from both of these episodes?
It's mostly from part 1. So it was basically seeing the crew come together for the first time since the season finale of season 3, and the kind of Mon Mothma talking to Ezra, because Ezra thinks they should just go and help Lothal, and Mothma makes it clear and kind of explains to him that it's not just Lothal, it's her planet, Alderaan. You have to help. That was my favourite moment, trying to explain that we have to take our time.
It was, that leadership displayed by Mon Mothma there, Scott, was just, it was hard to swallow for, I think, Ezra, because he wants so badly to get back to Lothal. And, Mon Mothma just starts calling up all these planets and just is like, okay, well, if we help them, what are we going to do for there? And it kind of puts some perspective in the scale of the scope of what this Rebel Alliance is up against, and knowing that there's even dissension among the ranks with Saw Gerrera. None of us really had it as our favorite moment, but I feel like we need to talk about the elephant in the room. And it was something that showed up in the preview for this episode last week, was the hologram of Saw talking to Mon Mothma. And that literally was just, that was like a fist pump moment there. You just felt like, yeah, Mon Mothma, you've got this. And even Saw Gerrera was like, why don't we see this all the time? And I don't think that's the type of leader the rebellion needs. She doesn't need to display her heart on her shoulder and be as passionate as Saw Gerrera is. She needs to be calm, cool, and collected and to keep this rebellion together. But it was a little bit of like almost like her filter came off for a little bit there, and you saw the leader that she is and the reason why everybody trusts her so much, Robin.
And just to piggyback off of that, Brian, I think you bring up a really great point, that moment where we see Saw interacting with Mon Mothma, that is one of the first times in Star Wars that, and I'm going to say that in Star Wars as a whole, not just with Rebels, where I felt like I was being pulled in 2 different directions as a fan. I could understand where Saw was coming from, and I could also really understand where Mon Mothma was coming from. It's like there are sides to choose here. And the development of these 2 episodes really pull at the Star Wars fan and ask us, which side are we on in this rebellion? And it's so cool to see that develop in that moment. And that's just a small moment in these 2 episodes.
Yeah, there was so much packed into this. I mean, I really feel like you definitely need to watch this a couple times to really pick up everything there. But You know, my actual favorite moment, and I think we all, as much as I really, really appreciated part 2 of this episode, just because there were so many little Easter eggs that we got the Death Troopers, we got mention of Krennic, we got mention of a super secret weapon. There's all of these scientists that, you know, we're talking about less than a year until the Death Star is completely operational. And you see the desperation that the Empire has where they're trying to smuggle people off world that are power reactor scientists and all these things because they're really trying to power that weapon. And that kyber crystal was not tiny, gentlemen. And it was just, Scott, it was just really interesting to see how Ezra reacted to it. And you almost, the foreshadowing as maybe more of an adult Star Wars fan is you could tell when only Ezra could hear it and nobody else could, that you almost knew it was the kyber crystal. But it was just so cool.
Yeah, it was just so cool to see everybody standing around and seeing Ezra going, can you hear that? And nobody else could. And it kind of helped as well to kind of lead them towards the scientist, which in part 2 got a bit funny when they were trying to rescue the scientists. That made part 2 a bit more funny.
With Chopper, yeah.
Yeah, and going into escape pods and one of the scientists saying, this is the worst rescue I've ever seen.
That sounds like something our friend Chopper would do. So
yeah, it just made that whole second episode, because the second episode was really dark, and I saw, like, if you've read Rebel Rising as well, you can see the paranoias and saw in these episodes as well. Like, he's very twitchy. He doesn't watch Justin. You know, what he did with Jen and Rebel Rising, kind of just left her. He left him in pretty much in the second part. He did author, but he just left him anyway. He didn't really care. It was all about Saw's own mission, really.
But Robin, it was something you said a little bit ago, though. I feel like this almost vindicated Saw a little bit, with that he had solid intel and that he wasn't just this crazy old kook. You know, he had some legitimate things. And I think this will, you know, Scott, you mentioned it. We got mention of Jeddah. I feel like there's a couple different things that are going to happen here, but we may actually, I don't know if we'll see it in Rebels, because Dave Filoni has told us multiple times now, and even a recent interview, that the show is the show and the movies are the movies. And I don't think there's going to be a real direct correlation. There's a lot of things where the show is kind of running up against Rogue One, but I don't think that it's going to tie. And maybe they show us where Saw and his partisans actually arrive at Jeddah, and maybe we see Jeddah in animated form. You know, this is like the first time, and I can't remember who I was talking to on our network, but I was like, maybe it'd been Chris, and I said, you know, I'm like, Chris, we saw the Death Troopers. If for some reason they flash to Scarif and I see a shore trooper in animated form, I'm going to lose it. I'm going to lose it, my friend.
Get the sweaty towels.
Yeah, get the sweaty towels. I think that's the first mention of sweaty towels in season 4 Rebels recap. All right, my favorite moment going back to part 1 of this episode was, it was very subtle, but we saw the appearance of the 2 TIE defenders coming out of Brom Titus's Star Destroyer. And we know back in season 3 how much of a threat these things are. And you know that there's only a few people on the Ghost. You know, there's Hera, Zeb, and Kanan. And Kanan is, in his very much Zen-like way, he's like, you know, trust me, I got this. And we just saw the power of the Force and being able to have Hera pilot in the mist when nobody can see. And it literally still, I find this hard for myself to comprehend all the time. And literally Kanan is blind, but with the Force, he can see just as well as anybody else and doesn't have those limitations. And I just thought that sequence only lasted about a minute or two, but it just being able to fly in and out of those mountains and basically get rid of those 2 TIE defenders with knowing how much of a threat they are, I just thought that was so cool. And you saw how much Kanan and Hera trust each other, and you see that underlying love between the 2 of them that really has never really materialized on screen all that much, but you just know that it's there behind the scenes.
Yeah, there's a lot there between Kanan and Hera that we see in that moment. And like you said, Brian, you said it beautifully. The relationship between Hera and Kanan is really starting to now kind of not necessarily, it's developed over time, but we're starting to see it now come together. And we're starting to see Kanan kind of move away. He knows he's not going to get his eyesight back. So he might as well come to the fact of, I got to use what I have for the common good like a Jedi would, and just be who he is and not somebody else that he's not.
Yeah, just like a lot of these episodes is we're going to be in this breakneck pace all the way through kind of the first half break. We're going to get a break for The Last Jedi, and then we're going to come back and they're going to finish this final season of Rebels with a flurry. But gentlemen, I think we also need to talk about what some of our biggest questions are now, because Star Wars is great about answering some questions, and then we're just left with all these other questions from there, and now we have our theories. And Scott, what is like your biggest question now, leaving this episode knowing what we know now?
It's really Ezra. We're seeing Ezra start to be. You saw it there really at the start of the episode where part one, where he was like, he wants to do stuff, but he saw what Saw's doing and wonder if that's the way to go. Like you see him start to get a wee bit more darker, a wee bit. So my question there is, are we going to see Ezra go down that path, being darker and using Saw's tactics?
Oh, that's a tough one, because we've kind of alluded to it where, you know, Ezra even kind of channeled a little bit of Master Yoda's advice for him is it's not, you know, it's not how you fight, it's how you choose to, or you know, I just butchered that completely, Robin, but you know, he's conflicted. I don't know if I agree, Scott, that this might lead him down a darker path, but I think he's trying to figure out where does he fit in all of this. And you could almost overlay something that Rey says in the trailer for The Last Jedi is like, help me find my place in all of this. And maybe, Scott, you're really onto something where you just cracked the Dave Filoni code, and now we kind of know maybe this is how we put Ezra on the shelf, Robin. This is how he can exist in a post Star Wars Rebels universe that doesn't involve a death. And I think a lot of Star Wars Rebels fans want, you know, if they can't possibly be in any of the other films, then they must, you know, they gotta bite it. And I'm not sure about that, Robin.
Yeah, it's really hard to tell at this moment right now, because I feel like Ezra's story is still being played out. As we know with Star Wars, storylines do change, things do happen. And even though we might think that we're heading down a certain path with Ezra, and I think Scott does bring up a really good point, that there is a darker tone starting to become associated with Ezra compared to what we've seen in the past. And I think it's because he's being influenced by outside forces. A lot of that is reliant on Lothal, the action that Mothma did not take to advance upon Lothal. And now Gerrera is trying to say, hey, you want to start getting stuff done? This is the approach you have to take. So I think that's where the darker tone is probably coming from, but I don't know that for a fact. None of us know that for a fact, because Filoni is the master of mixing it up a little bit.
Absolutely. So, Robin, what's your biggest question now, leaving this episode?
My biggest question is whether we're going to see a Saw Gerrera and Two Tubes Starsky and Hutch style film, but that's beside the point. But really, I think for me, it goes right back to Saw Gerrera. I really want to know where that Saw Gerrera and Mon Mothma relationship goes. My question is, does it take a path of where Mothma starts to realize, wow, Saw's actually doing something that might help us? Or does it continue down the canon path of, no, this guy is really going against what the foundations of the rebellion are? That's my question heading forward. What do we see develop?
And I think it's got to be pretty bad. I think there's going to be this inflection point at some point here that it's going to be even worse than it is now. That I think that's going to be pretty cool that we might see that in Star Wars Rebels. Robin, I'm going to piggyback on kind of what you said and twist it in a little bit way. What my biggest question going forward is, I'm probably, although, all joking aside about maybe seeing Scarif in animated form, we, now seen the Death Troopers again. We saw a female voice Death Trooper. That, to me, leads me to think even more questions that obviously this isn't exclusive to just, what the Death Troopers were all like these, 6'5", really tall individuals that now we know can be female and male. I think that's really cool. I mean, we're seeing it kind of post Return of the Jedi and the sequel era with Captain Phasma. That's just really fascinating. But there's a couple little things that Death Trooper had said that I want to know more about. Obviously, we mentioned Krennic. That's going to lead us into Rogue One. But my biggest question going forward is Saw Gerrera and his timeline. Because from where we see him now, and he's there with two tubes, and it was just great to see the U-Wing there, by the way. I love that ship, and just seeing it in animated form was excellent. Jeez, Robin, we just talked. There's got to be like this inflection point between Saw Gerrera and the Rebellion and Mon Mothma, but there's also got to be this thing where he is almost mortally wounded to the fact where he starts needing to wear that, exoskeleton, basically, and he needs to use the breathing apparatus. And knowing that his time is short, but now we know, with the benefit of Star Wars Rebels, when we first saw Rogue One, that he's only in that condition for less than a year. So what happens? I want to know what happens to him now.
Yeah, I mean, Saw is one of those characters that I think, again, I know we said it before, but I think it's important to restate this, that as we continue with Star Wars Rebels, I'm sure we're going to get more about him, Scott. I'm pretty sure, based on what we know from Catalyst, Scott, as well, I think Saw's character is really going to get drawn out, but not tell us too much because there is that book there.
Yeah, I wonder. I don't know how far, if you show up. He probably will show up again in Rebels near the end. So I think he'll be in that kind of skeleton kind of look for a couple of months, really, right leading up to Rogue One. Whether we see it in Rebels or we see it in a comic, it'll be one of the two. Hopefully we see it in Rebels because we get to see it in animated form and actually see him physically get hurt. And then maybe that's how maybe then Mothra realises that the way he's done things, that's not the way to go. When she realises how dangerous and how injured he got.
There's a lot of exciting stuff coming up, guys, and we just barely scratched the surface of In the Name of the Rebellion. So again, we can't stress it enough. Star Wars Rebels fans, go back and watch it for yourself. Watch it multiple different times. Talk about it on social media. Come up with your theories. That's one of the best parts of this great show that we're graced with, and it's very sad to know that the end is near. And I don't know. It's nerve-wracking but exciting all at the same time. And we've got a couple episodes coming up. One day from now on October 30th with The Occupation and Flight of the Defender, and who knows what those are all about. If you want to dig into, maybe get a little bit of sneak preview, I'm sure you can find it, but we will be here next week to break all this down, find out what our favorite moments are. And again, as we get more information, guys, what are our new theories? What are we thinking about going forward? So great stuff here. Guys, I think it's about that time of show, don't you?
Yeah, I think we're getting pretty close to it here, Brian.
Yeah, it's plug time. So, Mr. Vogt, where can the good people find you on social media?
Well, this Halloween, you can find me at El Zorro Ren. No, I'm kidding. You can follow me over on Twitter at Mr. Vogt Tweets. Please make sure to head on over to Instagram. Follow me at The Official Vote. Send me one of those good old friend requests over on Facebook, and that's where you can find me everywhere. Mr.
Inch?
You can find me, well, you'll be finding me doing Halloween, unfortunately. I will be in my bed. So we don't do it in the UK that much. So yeah, you can follow me at Facebook on Scott Inch or at Twitter at ScottInch85.
And you guys can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Jedi Scavenger SW. Make sure to head over to BrickCityBlockade.com for all the latest articles and stuff we've got going on over there. And again, head over to Google Play, iTunes, SoundCloud, wherever you need to listen to this great podcast network. We greatly appreciate it. And if you can leave a rating and a review, it helps us out even more. So our good friend, Mr. Robin Vogt here, can get lots of great guests on, and we can hear about that positive message in the Star Wars galaxy. So, guys, I think that wraps it up. Like we always close all of our shows, may the force be with you.
Always.